Purchasing commercial aircraft is one of the largest, most complex, and least visible businesses in the global economy. An airline doesn't simply walk into a store, choose a model, and write a check. The decision involves passenger forecasts, fuel prices, future routes, maintenance costs, pilot availability, access to credit, environmental regulations, manufacturer reputation, and even geopolitics. The process typically begins in a fleet planning office, where a seemingly simple question is considered: what aircraft will the company need in 5, 10, or 15 years? The answer depends on variables that are constantly changing. If a region grows, more seats are needed. If fuel prices rise, older aircraft become expensive. If new long-haul routes emerge, longer-range aircraft are required. If airports become congested, operating larger aircraft becomes advantageous. If demand weakens, an overly ambitious fleet can become a trap. The first analysis is operational. The airline compares its current network with the network it wants to build. A narrow-body aircraft, such as those in the Airbus A320 or Boeing 737 family, is suitable for short and medium-haul routes with high frequency and relatively controlled costs. A wide-body aircraft, such as an Airbus A350, a Boeing 787, or a Boeing 777X, is justified when the company needs to cross oceans, move more cargo, or connect major international hubs. The decision depends not only on distance. Passenger density, average ticket price, cargo capacity, airport weather, runway altitude, and noise restrictions also matter. The second layer is economic. A modern aircraft promises lower fuel consumption, less maintenance, and greater reliability. But it also demands a huge investment. The airline calculates the cost per seat, the cost per flight hour, and the total cost of ownership. On a short route, an oversized aircraft can fly with empty seats and destroy profitability. On a long-haul route, an undersized aircraft can miss out on potential demand and lose revenue to better-equipped competitors. The third layer is technical. Every new model introduces complexity. Pilots must be trained, mechanics must be certified, spare parts must be stocked, simulators must be leased or purchased, crews must adapt to new cockpits, new procedures, and new systems. This is why many airlines prefer common aircraft families. Maintaining a homogeneous fleet allows for pilot interchange, simplified maintenance, and better support contracts. An aircraft is not evaluated as an isolated machine, but as part of an ecosystem. The fourth layer is strategic. Buying aircraft means reserving slots on the production lines of Airbus, Boeing, Embraer, or ATR. In high-demand cycles, securing early deliveries can be as important as getting a good price. An airline that waits too long may discover that the next available slots are 7 or 8 years away. That delay changes the entire strategy. A route that seemed profitable in 2028 may already be occupied by a competitor by 2031. The mystery of this business lies in that gap between the public announcement and the actual decision. When an airline announces it will buy 50 aircraft, the market usually interprets the order as a sign of expansion. But internally, it can mean many things. It could be a replacement of older aircraft. It could be a defensive move to lock in production slots. It could be a way to put pressure on another manufacturer. It could be a financial move to improve leasing terms. It could even be a flex property order, with options that will never be exercised. The market for large commercial aircraft is dominated by two names, Airbus and Boeing. This concentration turns every large order into an industrial battle. For an airline, choosing between the two isn't just about comparing machines. It's about choosing a decades-long relationship with a manufacturer, its engines, its technical support, its upgrades, its delays, and its risks. Airbus and Boeing compete with overlapping product families. The Airbus A320neo competes with the Boeing 737 MAX. The Airbus A321neo, especially in its longer-range versions, occupies a valuable niche among single-aisle aircraft capable of flying long routes at a lower cost. The The Boeing 787 competes with the Airbus A350 on long-haul international routes, although each model has variants with different capabilities. The Boeing 777X aims to cover the high-capacity, long-haul segment, while Airbus focuses on efficiency and flexibility with the A350. Competition doesn't end with advertised performance figures. Manufacturers sell promises of fuel consumption, reliability, availability, and residual value. An aircraft that uses less fuel can save millions over its lifetime. An aircraft with less downtime generates more flight hours and more revenue. An aircraft with high resale value reduces financial risk. On paper, small percentage differences become enormous figures when multiplied by hundreds of flights, thousands of hours, and 20 years of operation. Manufacturers don't negotiate alone. Around each aircraft appear engine manufacturers, avionics suppliers, companies that produce interiors, entertainment systems, seats, galleys, lavatories, landing gear, and structural components. In some models, the airline can choose between engines from different manufacturers. That choice opens up another parallel negotiation. One engine may be more efficient, another may have a better maintenance history, another may offer better warranties or spare parts availability. In aviation, the aircraft is the platform. The engine is a central part of the real cost. Large airlines exploit this competition. A company that operates Airbuses can negotiate with Boeing to gain market leverage. A company historically linked to Boeing may evaluate Airbus to improve its discounts. Sometimes, the real intention isn't to switch manufacturers, but to improve the offer from the current supplier. In other cases, the switch actually happens and reconfigures the entire fleet for decades. Manufacturers also consider the symbolic value of certain customers. A prestigious airline, a fast-growing company, or an airline located in a strategic region may receive attractive terms because its order serves as a showcase. If an influential company adopts a new model, others may interpret it as a sign of confidence. In an aircraft launch, the first customers carry enormous weight. Their order helps validate the program, attract financing, and convince the market. Geopolitics adds another dimension. Airbus represents a vast European industrial architecture, with plants, suppliers, and jobs spread across several countries. Boeing represents a centerpiece of the American industrial complex. When a state-owned or flag carrier negotiates a fleet, the contract may intersect with diplomatic agreements, trade relations, and public funding. In some countries, purchasing aircraft is not just a business decision, it can also be a political signal. However, the dominance of Airbus and Boeing does not eliminate other players. Embraer has an important role in regional and smaller capacity aircraft, especially for routes where a large aircraft would be inefficient. ATR dominates the regional turboprop market, useful for short routes and secondary airports. China is developing its own industry with the COMAC C919, a strategic aircraft aimed at reducing foreign dependence. Russia has also attempted to maintain its own programs, although sanctions and difficulties in obtaining international certification limit its global reach. The battle between manufacturers is slow, costly, and brutal. Designing a new aircraft can cost tens of billions of dollars. A failed program can drag on for years. A certification delay can freeze deliveries. A safety issue can destroy trust. That's why manufacturers prefer to evolve existing platforms rather than create entirely new aircraft. Modern commercial aviation advances through cumulative innovations: new engines, improved wings, composite materials, more advanced software, optimized cabins, and predictive maintenance systems. For the airline, this battle offers both opportunities and dangers. A new model can provide a competitive advantage, but also technical risk. A mature model may be more reliable, but less efficient. Buying early can secure good prices. Buying late can allow you to learn from others' problems. The decision is less like a conventional purchase and more like a calculated gamble in a very long-term industrial war. But at the same time, list prices for commercial aircraft have always had a touch of theatricality. For years, manufacturers published indicative values that allowed one to estimate the apparent size of a contract. An order for 100 aircraft could be advertised as a deal worth tens of billions of dollars. But in practice, almost no airline paid the full price. Discounts could be enormous, especially for large orders, model launches, strategic campaigns, or negotiations where the manufacturer needed to gain market share. The true price of an aircraft is one of the industry's best-kept secrets. Two airlines can purchase the same model and pay vastly different amounts. The difference depends on the order size, delivery schedule, prior relationship with the manufacturer, competitive bidding, interior configuration, engines chosen, included services, warranties, spare parts, training, and delay penalties. The basic aircraft is just the starting point. A commercial aircraft is configured almost as a custom-built piece of equipment. The airline decides how many seats to install, the row spacing, the business class configuration, the galleys, the number of lavatories, the entertainment system, connectivity, and lighting design. Every choice affects weight, maintenance, passenger experience, and final cost. The same model can be transformed into a high-density aircraft for budget flights or a premium cabin for international routes. The contract may include maintenance packages, initial spare parts, pilot training, simulators, technical support, software, special tools, and onboarding assistance. It may also include performance guarantees. If the aircraft consumes more fuel than promised or experiences availability issues, the airline can claim compensation. These clauses are especially important in new programs because the risk of early failures is higher. The negotiation process is typically divided into several phases. First, a request for information RFI is issued, in which the airline communicates its general needs. This is followed by a more formal request for proposal RFP. Manufacturers respond with technical and commercial offers. Next comes a stage of internal analysis, financial comparisons, and rounds of negotiation. Legal teams review the clauses. Banks assess financing options. Manufacturers adjust prices, delivery terms, and conditions. Finally, if the agreement is successful, a contract or preliminary agreement is signed and may be publicly announced. Price opacity allows all parties to protect their interests. The manufacturer avoids revealing the extent of any discount. The airline avoids showing competitors its true cost structure. Banks and lessors protect their valuation models. The market, meanwhile, only sees approximate figures. When a press release mentions list price value, the figure is usually more of a symbolic reference than an actual invoice amount. Discounts do not necessarily mean the manufacturer loses money. A large order can allow for economies of scale, fill production lines, and secure future revenue from support, spare parts, and services. Furthermore, selling an aircraft at a lower margin can open the door to future purchases. In aviation, a customer's value is measured over decades. An airline that buys 20 aircraft today might buy another 80 later, or recommend the platform to a subsidiary, alliance, or partner company. There are also hidden trade-offs. The manufacturer may offer better delivery terms, buybacks for used aircraft, financing support, training credits, or discounts on future orders. Sometimes, the negotiation reduces not only the aircraft's price but also the total cost of bringing it into service. For an airline, receiving intensive technical support during the first few months can be worth as much as several $1 million in discounts. The purchase doesn't end with the signing either. The contract stipulates progressive payments. There are usually initial deposits and pre-delivery payments. As the aircraft progresses through production, the airline or the financier makes disbursements. The final payment is due close to delivery. This structure reduces the manufacturer's risk and requires the airline to commit capital before operating the aircraft. The actual price also depends on time. An aircraft ordered today may not be delivered for several years. During that time, inflation, interest rates, exchange rates, and material costs change. Contracts include escalation formulas, which adjust the price according to agreed-upon indices. Therefore, a figure announced initially may not represent the exact final cost. Many airlines don't own all the aircraft they operate. A huge portion of the global fleet belongs to leasing companies, specialized financial firms that buy aircraft and lease them to operators. This model transformed modern aviation because it allowed for growth without tying up so much of their own capital. Leasing works in a seemingly simple way. A lessor buys the aircraft and delivers it to an airline for an agreed-upon period, which can last several years. The airline pays a monthly rent and operates the aircraft as part of its fleet. At the end of the contract, it returns the aircraft, renews the agreement, or negotiates another solution. But beneath this structure lies a complex financial system, full of valuations, guarantees, maintenance reserves, and return conditions. For an airline, leasing can be more flexible than buying. If demand falls, it's less painful to return aircraft at the end of the contract than to sell its own assets in a depressed market. If the company is growing rapidly, leasing allows it to add capacity without waiting for direct orders from the manufacturer. If it needs to test a route, it can operate with a less long-term commitment. If your financial balance is weak, accessing an aircraft through leasing may be more realistic than financing a full purchase. For lessors, the business is about managing risk and residual value. They buy popular aircraft with high global demand because they can easily release them if an airline fails or terminates the contract. An Airbus A320neo or a Boeing 737 AX has a market in many countries. A rare model with few operators can be more difficult to lease. This is why lessors influence the success of aircraft programs. If they have confidence in a model, they buy large quantities and help expand its reach. If they hesitate, the manufacturer loses a key source of demand. There is also the sale and leaseback, a common operation in the industry. The airline orders or takes delivery of an aircraft, immediately sells it to a lessor, and then leases it back. This provides liquidity, improves its balance sheet, and allows it to retain the aircraft. In practice, it converts an expensive asset into a payment obligation spread over time. During crises, this mechanism can be vital for freeing up cash. But leasing is neither free nor simple. Contracts require maintaining the aircraft in specific conditions. Upon returning it, the airline must meet strict technical standards. If the engines, landing gear, or major components are nearing major overhauls, compensation payments may be due. Lessors protect the asset's value through maintenance reserves, regular inspections, and detailed clauses. An aircraft returned in poor condition can lead to disputes worth millions. Leasing can also become more expensive when there is an aircraft shortage. If Airbus and Boeing delay deliveries, airlines need to maintain capacity and compete for available aircraft. This pressure drives up leases and market values. At such times, a used aircraft can become more valuable than anticipated. The shortage makes lessors powerful players because they control assets that many airlines need immediately. The decision between buying and leasing depends on each company's profile. A large, profitable, and stable airline may prefer to buy part of its fleet to capture long-term value. A young or expanding airline may prefer leasing to maintain flexibility. Many combine both models. They own some aircraft, lease others, and use sale and leaseback to adjust liquidity. The business becomes even more interesting because manufacturers also view lessors as strategic customers. An order from a large lessor can then be distributed among many airlines. This reduces the manufacturer's commercial risk and increases the model's global presence. Sometimes, an airline does not negotiate directly with Airbus or Boeing to obtain a new aircraft. He obtains it through a lessor who already had reserved positions on the production line. Once the order is signed, a race against time begins. Manufacturing a modern commercial aircraft requires coordinating thousands of parts, suppliers, and processes. The wings might come from one plant, the fuselage from another, the engines from yet another company, the interiors from specialized suppliers, and the electronic systems from an international network. The final aircraft is the result of a global chain of extreme precision. Manufacturers don't just sell airplanes, they sell delivery slots. In an industry where demand far exceeds immediate production capacity, having a reserved spot on the line can be worth millions. An airline that needs aircraft in 2029 can't wait until 2029 to order them. It must get in line years earlier. That's why order books are so important. They represent future revenue, but also an industrial promise that is difficult to keep. The final assembly line is just the last leg. Before getting there, each section goes through manufacturing, inspection, and transportation processes. At Airbus, large components cross Europe before assembly. At Boeing, the industrial system connects suppliers from different regions and countries. Any delay with one part can affect the entire aircraft. A problem with engines can leave finished fuselages waiting. A shortage of certified seats can delay deliveries. A bottleneck at smaller suppliers can have enormous consequences. The pandemic, supply chain tensions, and quality issues demonstrated that commercial aviation relies on a fragile supply chain. Although Airbus and Boeing are giants, many critical components depend on specialized companies with limited capacity. If one of them doesn't produce at the necessary rate, the entire industry feels it. Airlines, for their part, plan routes, sales, and retirements of older aircraft based on delivery dates that can shift. Delays are one of the most sensitive aspects of the contract. If the manufacturer delivers late, the airline may lose revenue, have to keep older aircraft in service longer, lease temporary capacity, or cancel planned routes. That's why contracts include compensation. This can take the form of payments, future discounts, additional services, or adjustments to commercial terms. But compensation rarely covers the full operational impact. An aircraft that doesn't arrive on time can disrupt an entire network. Certification adds another layer of uncertainty. Before entering commercial service, a new model or a major variant must be approved by aviation authorities. This process evaluates safety, systems, performance, procedures, and documentation. If problems arise, entry into service is delayed. For the manufacturer, this means additional costs. For airlines, it means waiting for capacity that was already integrated into their plans. The aircraft must also undergo testing before delivery. Hydraulic, electrical, pressurization, flight control, engine, avionics, and interior systems are all checked. Then, test flights are conducted. The airline inspects the aircraft, reviews documentation, and formally accepts delivery if everything meets the agreed-upon specifications. At that moment, the aircraft ceases to be an industrial promise and becomes an operational asset. But even after delivery, entering service requires preparation. Pilots must be qualified. Manuals must be integrated. Maintenance systems must recognize the aircraft. Spare parts must be available. Cabin crews must be familiar with the configuration. Airports must have compatible equipment. An airline may receive an aircraft and not put it into service immediately if the organization isn't ready. With new aircraft, the first few months are closely monitored. Minor malfunctions, software adjustments, procedural changes, and technical bulletins appear. The industry calls this model maturation. It doesn't necessarily mean insecurity, but rather operational learning. However, if problems are frequent, the cost increases. A grounded aircraft doesn't generate revenue. An aircraft requiring repeated inspections disrupts schedules, irritates passengers, and eats into profit margins. Engines are one of the economic centers of the business. In some cases, the engine manufacturer offers hourly contracts. The airline pays according to usage, and the supplier commits to maintaining, repairing, or replacing components under certain conditions. This model transforms an uncertain cost into a more predictable expense. For the engine manufacturer, it means recurring revenue for years. For the airline, it means protection against unpredictable repairs. A modern engine is an extreme feat of engineering. It operates at extremely high temperatures, with minimal tolerances, and at enormous speeds. Its efficiency can determine the profitability of a route. But it also requires expensive maintenance. Major overhauls can cost millions. Parts have a limited lifespan. Some must be replaced after specific cycles. On a short-haul aircraft, a cycle is equivalent to one takeoff and landing. That's why short routes wear out certain components faster than long routes. Maintenance is divided into daily tasks, minor checks, and major scheduled inspections. Some are performed overnight. Others require taking the aircraft out of service for days or weeks. The most extensive may involve dismantling interiors, inspecting structures, checking wiring, and replacing major components. The airline must plan for this work without disrupting its schedule. An aircraft generates revenue by flying, but it can only fly if it meets every technical requirement. Manufacturers sell support packages to sustain this operation. They offer access to documentation, digital platforms, data analytics, priority spare parts, and technical assistance. Modern aviation increasingly relies on predictive maintenance. Onboard sensors and systems generate data that allows failures to be anticipated before they cause cancellations. The aircraft becomes a constant source of information. This data flow also has commercial value. The manufacturer can detect global patterns, improve components, and offer advanced services. The airline can reduce downtime, but technological dependence increases. Operating a modern aircraft requires not only mechanics and hangars, it requires software, connectivity, analytics, and support contracts. Interiors open up another business. Airlines modify cabins to refresh their image, increase density, introduce premium economy, or improve entertainment. Each change requires certification, design, seat purchases, installation, and downtime. A cabin can transform an aircraft's economics. Adding more seats reduces the cost per passenger but can affect comfort and brand perception. Installing premium suites increases revenue per seat but reduces overall capacity and increases weight. Spare parts are another critical component. An airline cannot wait weeks for an essential component. It must maintain its own inventory or have access to supply networks. Manufacturers and suppliers operate global logistics centers to deliver parts quickly. When a model is new and the global fleet is still small, spare parts may be scarcer. When a model is widespread, availability improves and costs tend to be more competitive. Residual value also depends on maintenance. A well-maintained aircraft holds a better resale or leasing price. Technical records are as important as the aircraft itself. Every repair, inspection, part replacement, and upgrade is documented. Without traceability, the value drops. In aviation, an aircraft's history is part of its asset. After 20 or 30 years, many aircraft are retired from passenger service. Some are transferred to smaller airlines. Others are converted into freighters. Some are dismantled for parts. Engines, landing gear, avionics, and reusable components can be highly valuable. An aircraft's economic life doesn't necessarily end when it stops carrying passengers. It can continue as cargo, spare parts, or recycled. However, commercial aviation is full of plans that seemed solid but were ultimately disrupted by unexpected crises. An airline can sign huge orders during a period of growth and then, years later, face a recession, a pandemic, a war, a currency devaluation, or a radical change in fuel prices. When that happens, the ordered aircraft can become problems. Cancelling an order isn't always easy. The contracts include deposits, penalties, and exit conditions. If the airline has already paid advances, it could lose money. If it cancels too late, the manufacturer can claim compensation. That's why many companies prefer to defer deliveries rather than cancel. Moving aircraft to later years allows them to buy time, adjust capacity, and avoid an open dispute with the manufacturer. Manufacturers also try to avoid cancellations because they damage the order book and market perception. A cancelled aircraft can be reassigned to another airline if the model is in high demand. But if the market is weak or the model has lost its appeal, the manufacturer is left vulnerable. That's why the order book is carefully analyzed. Not all orders are equally robust. Some belong to financially strong airlines, others to companies with uncertain futures. Fast-growing airlines are especially interesting. They can order hundreds of aircraft to sustain expansion. If the plan works, they become giants. If it fails, they leave behind problematic orders, undelivered aircraft, or fleets that are difficult to finance. In emerging markets, an optimistic projection can run up against weak currencies, limited infrastructure, or regulatory changes. There are also technological risks. A new model can suffer certification delays, engine failures, software problems, or operational restrictions. When an aircraft is grounded for technical or regulatory reasons, the impact ripples throughout the industry. Airlines lose capacity, manufacturers face compensation claims, lessors revalue assets, and passengers suffer cancellations. In serious cases, public trust is damaged. Engines have been a recent source of tension in several programs. A new generation promises efficiency, but engineering at its limits can lead to durability problems. When an engine requires early inspections or more frequent overhauls, aircraft spend more time on the ground. For an airline, the difference between a promised savings and the reality of maintenance costs can change the entire economic equation. Fuel is another key risk. An efficient aircraft is worth more when fuel is expensive. An older aircraft may still be profitable when fuel is cheap, but it can become unviable if prices rise. Airlines buy aircraft trying to anticipate an energy market that no one fully controls. Environmental pressure adds another dimension. Emissions, standards, carbon taxes, sustainable fuels, and noise restrictions can favor new fleets and penalize older aircraft. Interest rates also matter. An aircraft financed with debt becomes more expensive when money costs more. Leasing costs rise when lessors pay more to finance their purchases. An airline may find that the aircraft is still efficient, but its financing is no longer as attractive. In a business with tight margins, the cost of capital can be as decisive as fuel consumption. Passenger demand is perhaps the greatest mystery. Airlines build sophisticated models, but market behavior can defy forecasts. A city that seemed destined for growth can stagnate. An international route can be affected by visas, conflicts, or competition. A rival airline can flood the market with capacity. A high-speed train can reduce demand on medium-haul routes. Every aircraft purchased embodies a prediction about how millions of people will travel in the future. That's why flexible contracts are so valuable. Purchase options, conversion rights between models, staggered deliveries, and the ability to defer help manage uncertainty. An airline can swap part of an order for large aircraft for smaller versions or convert options into firm orders if demand improves. Flexibility comes at a price, but it can save balance sheets. The business of selling aircraft seems dominated by massive figures and precise technology. However, it is also riddled with uncertainty. Every order is a hypothesis about the future. A hypothesis written in contracts, financed with debt, manufactured with titanium, aluminum, and composite materials, and launched at 900 kilometers per hour.